World Series on Fox. Game 1 tomorrow night. We got Dodgers, Blue Jays. You talked about it with KB on the broadcast, that Shohei game the other night.
I think it's one of the greatest sporting achievements ever. I think what he did with 10 strikeouts, 3 home runs, one of those balls going out of the stadium, and then leading his team like he has, coming back from that elbow injury and performing the way he did is just absolutely incredible.
Can you think of, on the football field, like what's the equivalent? You know, we don't have a perfect game in football, but are there some performances that stick out to you?
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I wasn't a part of too many. I think for me, I always felt like I left some out there. I had a few games which were pretty good. I think the first half against Tennessee in 2009 in the snow, I threw 5 touchdowns in the second quarter. We won the game 59-0. I think Tennessee actually finished with negative yards in that game. It was incredible. And there was one other game that I played in, 2007, Patriots at Bills. We scored a touchdown on every offensive drive. It was absolutely incredible. Our defense played great, went into a tough, hostile environment against a Buffalo team that had shown a lot of toughness, and we played one of the greatest games I can ever remember as a team. I remember Peyton Manning had a game in the season opener 2013, Broncos versus Ravens at home. Peyton threw 7 touchdowns in that game, and I remember staying up to watch it because I couldn't believe it was happening. I knew that Peyton was always a huge rival for our team, so in some ways I was always rooting for them to lose because I knew that they were going to be in a race for us to be the number 1 seed. So he starts the season that way, and then not only did he have a great game that game, he threw 55 touchdown passes that year, which is a record that's very possibly may never be broken. All right, another one, Joe Montana, Super Bowl 19. Kind of a hard one for you guys to pick out, but I remember that because I was a 49er fan. He threw 3 touchdowns. I remember he ran for a touchdown. They beat the Dolphins. 330 yards, I know sounds a little bit decent right now, but back then, that was an incredible amount of yards that he threw for. That was a ridiculous performance. Running backs, Adrian Peterson, I think he ran for almost 300 yards, 296 or something like that. That was crazy. Julio Jones, my former teammate, he went for over 300 yards against the Carolina Panthers. That was an insane performance. I remember Jerry Rice one time caught 5 touchdowns in a game and went for over 225 yards. Another ridiculous performance.
Oh, Bob, we appreciate you doing this. And I think I'm a Dodger fan, so I'm very biased, but I thought Game 7 was the best World Series game I've ever seen. And I've watched as many as you, but I've watched most of them. Am I guilty of being a homer there?
No, actually not. This is as good and likely better than any Game 7, not just because it was thrilling and close and went to extra innings, but because there were so many moments within it where you could logically say, change how this went, either direction, and the outcome of the game is different. So many heart-stopping moments where the whole thing hung in the balance. I mean, just think of the play in the bottom of the 9th after Rojas' unlikely homer had tied the game, and much has been made about the fact that IKF took perhaps too cautious a lead and didn't get a good enough break. Then the ball is hit to Rojas, who makes, with the infield in, a really good play on a difficult play to make, but then for a split second he stumbles. His heart must have been in his throat. Then it would have been irrelevant if he hadn't righted himself that IKF didn't have a good lead. He would have scored easily. But not only does he right himself, he makes a very good throw under the circumstances. He's off balance. Now Will Smith has to reach like a first baseman for it, and he has the presence of mind to know that his heel might have come off the plate, and he puts it back down a millisecond before IKF slides in. And some have said since it was a force play, there was no need for him to slide. He could have run through the bag through the plate like you do at first base. But then on top of that, it was close enough to be reviewed. Of course the Blue Jays asked for a review. You could have had the 7th game of the World Series end on a replay review, which would have been utterly bizarre. Utterly bizarre. And then after the Will Smith, and on the very next pitch, Clement hits one toward the wall, and we know what happened with Hernandez and Paez. Considering the circumstances, as Tom Verducci says, and few people are as knowledgeable as Tom about every aspect of baseball, including its history, he believes that under the circumstances, yes, it was a great catch, and there have been others that were as great or perhaps even greater in terms of what was required to make the catch. But considering what was at stake, the entire World Series on that play, he thinks it's the greatest catch in World Series history, and all of this happens within a matter of moments, and we barely scrape the surface of all the other things within that game that not only could have affected the outcome, but provide one of the things that makes baseball so great, debate about what if. Should they have pulled this guy? Should they have brought this guy in here? We could be talking about this not just throughout the offseason, through the history of baseball. They'll be talking about this game.
Bob,
and the whole World Series, I'll stop talking in a second.
That's okay.
It isn't just that the seventh game was so great. You had two other games that were epic. Think of the way Game 6 ended with the Hernandez throw to Rojas on the little blooper. I think Varsho hit it. If that ball drops, they tie the game, and maybe they win the game right there, and it's over in 6. And then you have the 18-inning game in Game 3 ending on the Freeman walk-off. I mean, this World Series was insanely great.
Bob, just because I know you're doing a lot of interviews for this, we had Miguel Rojas on after the World Series, and he told us he can't watch that play, the one where you said his heart might beat. It causes him too much anxiety to even watch a replay. Even though they won, he can't watch it. So you're dead on when you say his heart must have been in his throat.
Yeah. Well, you could tell in that one split second the anguish he must have felt. Oh, my gosh, I just threw the whole World Series away.
Yep.
But he had the presence of mind to come up with a good enough throw to extend the game.
It follows in a great tradition of, like, unlikely World Series heroes, like Miguel Rojas. Now, and it's a game of moments, and there were lots of individual moments there, the Pajas catch, the plate, home plate, all that stuff. But for me, the one that just took my breath away was Miguel Rojas yanking that ball to left field and tying the game. Where does that rank in terms of World Series home runs?
It's way up there. As you said, there have been other unlikely heroes. I go back quite a long ways. Al Weiss for the Mets in the '69 World Series, but the Mets won in 5, and that home run came in the middle of the game. It didn't come with everything at stake, just 2 outs removed from the season and the series ending for the Dodgers. I can't think of someone that fits the bill of A, unlikely character to be a hero, but also the importance of the moment. Hal Smith in the epic 7th game of the 1960 World Series, which is remembered for Bill Mazeroski's home run that won it in the bottom of the 9th. But in the bottom of the 8th, the Pirates were down 7-6, and Hal Smith, whose name would never have appeared in anything other than agate type before or after that in his entire career, hits a 3-run home run and puts the Pirates up 9-7. Now, the Yankees scored 2 in the top of the 9th. That set the stage for Mazeroski. The modern analytics have this win probability added.
Yep.
And supposedly that home run by Hal Smith created the greatest swing in win probability added from defeat to what looked like victory, at least in the moment. But, okay, that's 1960.
Yeah.
And it was in black and white. And I was only 8, so my recollection of it may not be perfect, but I think it's pretty right on. I don't think you can put anything ahead of Rojas if you're combining unlikely hero with the import of what he did.
Having watched being at the home games and watching all the games, the one thing I'll say about Toronto, and Toronto played a really good series.
They did.
I think the better team won, but in my mind, it feels like Toronto outplayed the Dodgers. Does that make sense?
I think that's apt. The Dodgers were the better team. Not by that much. I mean, Toronto, because it's Canada and perhaps American fans, not North American fans, but U.S. fans, underrated them. I didn't underrate them. I was asked before the series started, and I said if they can win one of the first 2 games in Toronto, I think this series has a good chance to go at least 6 and possibly 7. But, yes, the Dodgers overall were the better team, but actually the Blue Jays played better throughout the series. They did more things right than the Dodgers did, but the Dodgers did enough things right to win it.
Bob, we're talking to Bob Costas, and again, his special, MLB Network special, 2025 World Series Game 7, airs tomorrow, 4 o'clock in L.A., 7 o'clock Eastern, with Bob and Tom Verducci. Can't wait, Bob. Really looking forward to it. But since we never get you, a couple of things. Settle an argument between Mason and I.
Okay.
Mace is convinced, and you know more about baseball than pretty much anybody.
Yes.
Mace is convinced that in 2027, we're getting a work stoppage no matter what. He says the players will never, ever cave on a salary cap. I think they are going to accept some type of a cap because baseball is bringing in too much money and it's too successful, and I think a work stoppage would be death. If you had to pick a side in that argument, who's more correct?
At this point, it should be just a hard-headed business negotiation, not a holy war. But the leaders of the Players Association, with whom I've always sided more or less since the days of Marvin Miller, they take their cues still from Marvin Miller, from Don Fear, and from Gene Orza, who were unyielding on that. But the other three major sports have some version of a salary cap, and players make a whole lot of money. Now, it's different. Obviously, baseball's different for a variety of reasons. Players spend a long time in the minor leagues, and then there's a period of time in the majors before they're arbitration eligible or free agency eligible. We get all of that. So not every situation is exactly comparable, but this should be a business deal, not a matter of high holy principle, because the players have won on every principle through all the years. Now the question is, how do we sit down and understand our mutual interests, and how do we divide the pie, and not incidentally, whether Dodger fans or Yankee fans or Met fans, even if they don't spend their money as effectively, and a handful of other teams, even if their fans don't want to hear it, there is a problem with, if not competitive balance, with opportunity. I mean, how long can the Milwaukee Brewers accept that, yeah, we've been brilliant and we've won the division 6 out of 7 times and we won 97 games this year and we're lucky to be in the Central instead of the East or the West, but we're operating at a huge deficit in terms of our resources. There's something out of whack here. When the Dodgers can just say, Edwin Diaz, sure, that's the one relative weakness, we'll sign Edwin Diaz. And the Guggenheims and our whole situation here allows us to do things that perhaps even the Yankees aren't able to do. Is there some equilibrium that can be established here without sending any players to a street corner rattling a tin cup? There should be.
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree with you.
So Dave Roberts was asked this week about a salary cap, and he was asked, would a salary cap hurt the Dodgers? And he answered this way. He says, I just think we have an organization that whatever the rules and constrictions are, we're going to dominate. Do you agree with Dave Roberts? Do you think he's right?
Yeah, I think he's right. Do the Dodgers have the resources? Yes. Are they one of the most resourceful within that teams? Absolutely. Their front office and the entire operation, up and down, including Roberts and his coaches, is first rate.
Yeah, I think they probably would work it out. All right, Bob, last thing for me. You've had an incredible career, and it's one, as this special tomorrow will indicate. But I was thinking about something. If I came to you and said, I'm going to put one thing in a time capsule from your career that in 200 years from now we're going to show people this is Bob Costas at his best. It can be from the Later Show. I think
love the Later Show.
I think about the Mary Lou Henner interview, which I still watch, which was hilarious. I think about all the Olympics. I love the Olympics you did. People forget you were the voice of the NBA very briefly. You've done play-by-play baseball. If I put you on the spot and say, what are we putting in that time capsule? What goes in?
Well, if it's later, then I have to pick which of the 600 interviews.
Yeah,
they weren't all 10s on a 10 scale, but a lot of them, Paul McCartney and Mary Lou Henner for comedic reasons and others for more dramatic reasons. So we'll leave that aside. Even though baseball has always been my favorite sport, basketball has always been second. So I guess it might be the call of Michael Jordan's last shot for the Bulls.
That's great.
That turned defeat into victory, because it epitomized so much of what he was about and so much of what that era in the NBA was about. And after watching The Last Dance a few years ago and they replayed a lot of the calls, I was happy that most of those calls held up pretty well. So I wouldn't be embarrassed if that wound up in the time capsule. Well, by the time anyone busts the time capsule open, I'll be long gone, so it won't matter.
You go.
Yeah. Hey, Bob, I got one thing for you about baseball, because you're, Hall of Fame broadcaster and great wordsmith. Put into words what Shohei Ohtani is doing and what he now means to the game.
He is as close in his meaning and impact on the game and expanding its popularity, as close as any baseball player has ever been to what Michael Jordan was in the 90s. The old joke then was the other team should chip in and pay his salary. It shouldn't be just the Bulls, because he's not just helping the Bulls, he's helping the NBA. And he helped it expand globally by being the most noticeable part, the most celebrated part of the Dream Team in '92 in Barcelona, and all the marketing and everything else. And I'm not saying that Ohtani equals that, because baseball is different from basketball and we're in a different era and all the rest. But when you consider the fact that Ohtani is fascinating to people who don't know an inside the park home run from a wild pitch, he's fascinating to them. You hear people who don't have much baseball background, aren't avid fans, wanting to watch Ohtani, talk about Ohtani. They ask people like you and me about him, and then the expansion of fascination with Major League Baseball into Asia and specifically Japan, where baseball has always been popular, but now we know how popular Ohtani and the others, Yamamoto and a long list of others, have now made Major League Baseball in Japan. I think his impact, it's to take nothing away from other great players. He's unique. The word unicorn is always applied to him, and he is. You know, Ruth was a Hall of Fame quality pitcher before he became the greatest slugger of his time, but he never did both simultaneously at the level that Ohtani is doing it, and I don't think anybody in our lifetime ever will. So he's a truly unique player. People use the word unique when they really mean rare, but it applies to him. He's a unique player, and his impact is greater, in my view, in terms of baseball overall than even the greatest players of recent history.
All right. Oh, I forgot one last thing, Bob. You used a phrase when we were getting ready for your appearance today. We pulled some old stuff of yours, and you used a phrase that Mason and I use all the time, but we have no idea where we got it. This is the phrase. Hit it, Brian.
He was a hail fellow, well met.
Okay, hail fellow, well met. I think we are now misusing
right.
it. Mason,
when somebody passes away, we always say hail fellow, well met, and I don't know if we're using that correctly or not. You would know, Bob. Are we using that correctly?
You know, it predates even me, and I probably picked it up from some black and white movie someplace or something I read in a novel, but it generally referred to somebody who was always up for a good time. He was a friendly person, often might be a little portly sort of person for the most, maybe a little girth to the guy.
Yeah.
Might throw a few back, usually a beer in that case. The kind of guy would walk into the bar and say, "Hey, drinks are on me." Or you wouldn't mind if you just happen to find yourself with him. I hadn't planned to be spending the night with him, but he was good company. He's a hail fellow, well met, likes everybody, happy in his own skin, enjoying life. That's a hail fellow, well met.